Neighbor tells family that she remembers seeing a strange car come and go from the Sumners' house. And family says that they think that Carol and Reggie probably were just being nice, allowing the group to stay overnight so they didn't have to make the trip to and from Charleston all in one day.
"61-year-old Carol and Reggie Sumner originally met in school, and the young pair shared a brief romance before breaking up after graduation. It wouldn't be until later in life they would reconnect, fall in love and marry. After serving time in the Navy, Reggie got married and found work with the railroad. Carol also got married twice and had children of her own. But she had difficult marriages. The first ended in divorce, and the second was extremely abusive. Carol filed a restraining order against her second husband, but one day he showed up at her house, pulled a gun on her, and shot her 6 times. Carol survived, but her husband was chased by police and cornered. He then pulled the trigger and shot himself. Rhonda, Carol's daughter, took care of her mother after the traumatizing ordeal. She was only 10 years old at the time. But as soon as she could, Carol got back into work, holding down multiple jobs to support her family. 40 years passed before Reggie and Carol met again. In 2000, Carol was working at a cable television company when a phone call came in. On the end of the line was none other than her high school sweetheart, Reggie. It was like nothing had changed, and the pair quickly became inseparable. A year later, they married in Carol's home. They soon made the move to Jacksonville, Florida. Reggie decided that moving there would be the best thing for his health. Carol agreed, and they began preparing for it. They sold their Chevrolet Lamina to Tiffany Cole, one of their neighbours. The Sumners were very close to Tiffany, having known her since she was a little girl, and they treated her as part of the family. When Tiffany's father became ill, the Sumners stepped in to help, and many said they supported Tiffany like she was their own granddaughter. Tiffany started making monthly payments to the Sumners for the car they had given to her. Once they moved, she would regularly drive to Florida to give them the money and spend some time with them. In early July 2005, Rhonda tried several times to get hold of her mother and stepfather, but her calls were going unanswered. It wasn't long before Rhonda decided she had to make the 4-hour journey to Jacksonville to find out what was wrong. They all spoke every day on the phone, and after almost a week with no contact, Rhonda knew this was troubling. When she reached the house, the couple were nowhere to be seen. On July 10th, Rhonda made the call to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department to report the couple as missing. When law enforcement arrived, they noticed their car was gone and the front door was unlocked. Food was sat left on the stove, and plates and cutlery were left out too. It looked as if the couple had just picked up and left at a moment's notice. Carol's phone was still plugged in on charge, and her daily planner she never left without was on the table. The pair had also left their dog Mikey, as well as all their medication. Carol and Reggie weren't in good health, and departing without any of their medication was a huge cause for concern. Carol had been undergoing debilitating chemotherapy for liver cancer, which stemmed from hepatitis C, something she had contracted whilst undergoing a blood transfusion after being shot by her second husband. She also suffered from diabetes and osteoporosis. Reggie also suffered badly with diabetes and osteoporosis, and due to a break in one of his legs, was virtually confined to a wheelchair. The couple also weighed very little. Everyone was alarmed, and the media quickly ran with the story to get the word out there. Detectives immediately began an investigation, which started inside the house. Financial statements had been left out, and they contacted the banks to see if anything had been withdrawn. They put out a statewide alert for the couple's missing car, and it wasn't long before they got a hit. Just 2 days later, the abandoned Lincoln Town car was found almost 50 miles away from Jacksonville. The car was unlocked, and there were no keys left in the ignition. 5 hours after the car had been found, the police received a bizarre phone call.
How you doing? My name is Reggie Sumner. I'm out of town with my wife right now. Her sister passed away. A friend of ours that lives in the neighborhood called this morning and said that the garage was open and that the Lincoln was missing. We just moved actually to there not long ago from South Carolina.
He also said they were having difficulties using their bank cards, but police could tell straight away this was the voice of someone in their 20s or 30s, not their 60s. This definitely wasn't Reggie Sumner. When the officer asked to speak to Carol, someone else answered the phone.
Do you have anybody that we can contact to help us make sure that everything's at the house that should be there?
No, sir. My family lives in another state.
Police began trying to locate where the call was coming from and who the number was linked to. Another line of inquiry were the bank records. These showed that the couple's card was also active and being used to withdraw money from various ATM machines. Security cameras had captured the people using the card. And the information garnered from the phone analysis told police exactly who to look at. Phone records showed that the number had been used to call a car rental company. The car that was rented matched the car that was seen on some of the CCTV at the ATM machines. The people posing as the missing couple on the phone were none other than Tiffany Cole, Carol and Reggie's old neighbour, and her boyfriend, Michael James Jackson. Through GPS and the rental of the Mazda, the police were directed to a motel in South Carolina. 2 rooms had been rented out under Tiffany's name, and there were 3 people there: Tiffany, Michael, and another man, 18-year-old Alan Lindell Wade. The trio were questioned straight away. Tiffany admitted to participating in a robbery at the Sumners' home, but she and Michael said they knew nothing about where the couple were.
What was the purpose of it?
To get the credit cards and stuff.
Tiffany then suddenly threw a 4th name into the mix: Bruce Kent Nixon. But how and why had this come to be? And where were Carol and Reggie Sumner? When police finally located Bruce Nixon, he told them a shocking and disturbing story. Carol and Reggie had said that Tiffany was always welcome in their home and told her their door was always open. 24-year-old Tiffany and her boyfriend of 2 months, Michael, who was 23, travelled to Jacksonville to visit their friend, Alan Lindell Wade. While they were there, the Sumners happily agreed to give them a place to sleep. During Tiffany and Michael's stay, the Sumners mentioned that they had recently closed the deal on their South Carolina property for just short of $100,000. This would set in motion a frightening and calculated scheme. Michael took note of all the couple's belongings and furnishings in their home and began plotting a sick and twisted robbery. Initially, Michael considered breaking into the home while the couple were out of town, but the plan then evolved to them robbing and then killing the couple. They first thought about injecting the pair with a lethal dose of medication. However, that idea was dismissed, and they agreed on what would be an unthinkable plan. A month before the Sumners went missing, Alan rented a car to drive to Jacksonville to visit his friend, 18-year-old Bruce Kent Nixon. He told Bruce he had plans to rob someone's house, but didn't give any more details. Bruce stole some shovels from around his neighbourhood. They all drove across state lines into Georgia to a remote, wooded location and dug a hole, 6 foot deep and 4 foot wide. Alan and Bruce dug, assisted by Michael, while Tiffany held the flashlight. Purchases were also made for disposable gloves, plastic wraps, duct tape, and a fake gun. On July 8th at around 10 p.m, the group of 4 left in a rental car, a Mazda RX-8, and drove to the Sumners' home. Tiffany and Michael waited in the car while Alan and Bruce knocked on the door. Carol answered. The pair said they urgently needed to borrow a phone as they were having car trouble. Carol, wanting to help, let them in straight away. As soon as they entered, they aimed the fake gun at the couple. Carol and Reggie, dressed only in their pyjamas, were completely terrified and weak due to their health problems. The The Sumners cooperated fully, telling the men they could take whatever they wanted as long as they didn't hurt them. Despite this, Reggie and Carol were restrained with duct tape over their eyes, mouth, hands, and feet. Alan also disabled the telephone lines. While the couple were immobile, Alan and Bruce phoned Michael, who was waiting outside. Michael then entered the home and started searching for financial statements. He also took Reggie's prized coin collection. Both Bruce and Alan forced the Sumners into the trunk of their own Lincoln Town car. After this, Michael and Alan drove the Lincoln out to the woods, to the pre-dug hole. Bruce later said that when the trunk opened, the couple had managed to become free of the duct tape and were clutching each other tightly, holding hands and praying. Michael told Bruce to cover their eyes with the tape again, saying it was only a mind thing. He said he didn't want to see their eyes as he killed them. After forcing Carol and Reggie out of the car, they got the pin to the couple's bank card. Carol then had her jewellery snatched off, before she and Reggie were shoved into the hole next to each other. Carol and Reggie Sumner were then buried alive. Tiffany and Bruce were waiting in the hired Mazda just up the road. The group then drove the Sumners' vehicle to Sanderson, Florida, where they set about removing the evidence and wiping down the inside of the Lincoln before dumping it. They later returned to the couple's home to steal a computer and some more jewellery before checking into a hotel. They spent the night in a limousine, taking pictures with the stolen goods, showing off the cash and drinking bottles of champagne. Through tracking the group via cell phone data and CCTV, on July 14th, just 4 days after Rhonda had reported her mother and stepfather missing, police apprehended Alan, Tiffany and Michael in a South Carolina hotel. Inside their rooms, they found Carol's car keys, a suitcase containing the financial documents, receipts for items that had been purchased using the couple's money, Reggie's driver's license, credit cards and checkbooks. In Tiffany's car, detectives also found Reggie's coin collection. When Bruce Nixon was located just a day later, he admitted to everything and was more than willing to tell the detectives exactly what had happened and what each individual person's involvement had been. He also told the police he would take them to where the Sumners had been buried. An excavation was carried out and law enforcement found Carol and Reggie Sumner crouched under the dirt, holding each other. The medical examiner discovered that they had inhaled the dirt until they eventually died of mechanical asphyxiation. The earth they were buried under had compressed their lungs, smothering them. Bruce told the police that he had helped dig the hole, but only found out the following day that the plan was not only to rob the couple, but to bury them alive. Tiffany also claimed that she believed the hole was being dug to hide the stolen goods in, but Bruce said this was nonsense, and Tiffany knew exactly what was going to happen to Reggie and Carol. He said that she was the sole connection between everyone involved that night. She also told them all the couple's schedules, and she knew they would be home at that time after a long day at the doctor's. Bruce Nixon was arrested first. Tiffany Cole, Michael James Jackson, and Alan Lyndall Wade were subsequently arrested too, and all four were charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, armed kidnapping, and armed robbery. While in jail, Michael made a phone call to his grandmother. She read him a newspaper article about Bruce's cooperation with the police.
This mother showed them where the spot was at.
Yes, dear.
Bruce just killed us all.
Yes, dear.
This only added more to the already strong case against them. In court, Carol's daughter asked them not to sentence Alan to death. She also asked for leniency for Bruce, saying that both men had been manipulated by Michael. She said they were too young and were on drugs at the time of the murders. They were used in the worst way. Solving 2 deaths with more deaths does not make me happy. I know in my heart that my mom and Reggie would have felt the same way. Bruce pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and agreed to testify against the other 3. Following this, he was sentenced to 45 years in prison. Michael and Alan received the death penalty. Tiffany's trial took place in October 2007. During the trial, she stated that she had only agreed to the burglary and was totally unaware of the plot to kidnap and kill the couple. She testified that although she did help dig the hole in the ground, she had no idea what it would be used for. She claimed that even as they drove to the wooded area, she had no knowledge that the Sumners were bound in the trunk of the Lincoln. Prosecutors weren't settling for this account. They protested that she was the sole link between the group, and the only person that tied everything together was her. Tiffany didn't believe that she could be guilty of first-degree murder because she didn't personally kill the Sumners. But under Florida law, someone who participates in a crime can be found equally culpable for a murder, even if they didn't directly cause the death. Her defense attorney argued that Michael controlled and manipulated Tiffany during their short-lived relationship, and he was the real mastermind behind what had happened that night.
He knows a lot. That's what I think about him. And I think that he's really a smart person. You know what I'm saying?
The defense argued that her low intelligence level and mental health issues should also be taken into consideration.
I'm not asking for justice, but rather mercy. The same mercy that God has continues to give me. I believe that there are many more people that I can reach out to with God's guidance and your mercy.
But despite hers and her defence's pleas of innocence, the jury took just 90 minutes to deliberate, and they ultimately found her guilty. Their verdict was 9-3 for the death penalty. Tiffany is one of the youngest women on death row in the United States.
How are you?
Do you call it death row?
No, we call it life row.
It's life row.
Mm-hmm.
Life row?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Because we're not dying, we're living.
Do you ever think I might be executed?
No, you can't have that mentality. Because that means you've accepted
You've already
this.
died. You've already died.
Yeah, you
You're
cannot
already
have
dead.
that mentality.
One of the prosecutors on the case, Jay Plotkin, recalled, "I was a prosecutor for more than 20 years. There was not any case that I prosecuted where the crime was more vile or cruel than the torture and murder of the Sumners." Judge Weatherby added, "This court has had a hard time in coming up with a manner of death that could be more heinous, atrocious or cruel, or more painful and vile." Tiffany later asked the families for forgiveness in a letter she wrote to them. Some members of the family say they have forgiven her for their own sense of peace. Alan Wade later revealed to the media he had met a woman online named Sigrid, whom he married and had a child with. Sigrid had been writing to inmates on death row when she started talking to Alan, and this sparked a romantic relationship, despite conjugal visits not being permitted at Union Correctional Institution where Alan is being held. Sigrid somehow managed to get pregnant. A 2016 US Supreme Court ruling found that Florida's prior law permitting non-unanimous jury verdicts in death penalty cases actually violated the Sixth Amendment, prompting Florida to re-sentence more than 150 people. The state court said anyone sentenced after a 2002 ruling could now be eligible for a new hearing and possibly a new sentence. And because of this, in 2017, the Florida Supreme Court ordered a new sentence hearing for Tiffany Cole.
Developments in a big local story that we've been following since 2005. The Florida Supreme Court has thrown out the death sentence for Tiffany Cole, accused of murdering a St. Nicholas couple by burying them alive in Georgia. Joy went back into the News4Jax archives and has this update for us. Joy.
Mary, this was a story that so many people have followed. Carol and Reggie Sumner, they were reported missing by family, and days later we learned they had been kidnapped, robbed, and then buried alive. Now Tiffany Cole's death sentence has been thrown out. Now Cole will get a new sentencing hearing, and it's likely the two others who were convicted in the murders of the Sumners will also get new hearings because their death sentences were also not unanimous.
Michael James Jackson was previously sentenced to death with an 8-4 majority ruling, and Alan Lyndall Wade was sentenced with an 11-1 majority ruling. Neither had unanimous verdicts, so they will likely get new hearings as well. Some days when Rhonda's phone rings, she said she often forgets and for a second hopes her mother is on the line. Reggie and Carol Sumner had found happiness together after years apart and after so many years of pain and troubles in their own lives. They were a kind, generous and loving couple, All they wanted to do was spend their later years together. Their caring and giving nature will always be remembered by their family, and Rhonda keeps Carol and Reggie's ashes in an urn at her home so that the couple can stay together forever.